When Ubisoft announced Xdefiant, it seemed like they were making a bold statement, stepping into the competitive FPS market to take on juggernauts like Call of Duty and Overwatch and stuff like that. The pitch was kind of promising, a game that blended all this fast-paced action with more strategy with ability-driven gameplay, a return to skill-based multiplayers for players tired of matchmaking algorithms. Yet, as the dust settles, Xdefiant is now remembered as another in a long line of failed live service games. As it was just announced by Ubisoft themselves, the game is going to shut down at some point here. So what went wrong? To understand this failure of Xdefiant, we need to break it down from technical hurdles, marketing challenges, Ubisoft's own tarnished reputation, and all the important first impressions that it simply couldn't get it right. I'll be talking about this from my perspective especially. I have played all of the betas of the game and also played the first 3 to 4 months of the game almost daily for at least a couple hours. I think I have about 500 hours total in the game, if you're curious. Let's go one by one for all these mistakes they've made about this game. Well, from the very start, Ubisoft made a really avoidable misstep. Xdefiant wasn't released on other platforms such as Steam. The platform that's pretty much synonymous with PC gaming. Steam isn't just a storefront anymore. For a long time now, it's a central hub for millions of players. Launching a live service game without Steam is like hosting a party without telling most of your friends where it is. This decision significantly limited the game's visibility. Potential players either didn't know about the game, that it existed, or weren't interested in jumping through hoops to try it. Oh, another launcher. Oh, another account. Here we go. In a genre this crowded, where player acquisition and retention are everything, this oversight is a really fatal one in my opinion. Huge mistake. Another fundamental issue was Ubisoft's choice of the engine. Xdefiant was built on the Snowdrop engine out of all things, the same engine used for Ubisoft's MMOs like The Division. Snowdrop excels at creating really detailed, open environments for slower-paced cooperative play. However, it's a really wrong choice for the demands of a fast-paced FPS, where split-second precision and low latency are honestly non-negotiable. Players reported networking issues, desynchronization, and really unreliable hit registration at times. Bullets wouldn't register, opponents would die behind cover. It was a mess. In competitive shooters, these kinds of issues are unacceptable. And for Xdefiant, they were a death sentence immediately. The choice of engine wasn't just a technical limitation, it was a structural flaw that Xdefiant could never overcome in my opinion. The developers always talked about this is not the issue and the engine's very good. Yes, but no, right? The engine definitely had a lot to do with it. Moving on. In 2023, Xdefiant enjoyed a really brief window of huge hype of the game. Early tests showcased its potential, and players were really eager to see if Ubisoft could deliver this. But then came the delays. Ubisoft claimed the extra time was for polish, but when the game finally launched, it felt like nothing really had changed. The gameplay was riddled with technical issues, balance problems, and other really obvious flaws. First impressions are everything in a live service game. When Xdefiant stumbled out of the gate, it didn't just lose players, it lost their trust immediately. By the time meaningful improvements were made, which is like 3 to 4 months after, the audience had moved on. And Ubisoft was left playing catch-up. And usually it's an infinite catch-up that will never end, because the players aren't coming back. At the heart of Xdefiant's gameplay was its faction system. It was an attempt to combine tactical depth with the frantic pace of an arcade shooter like this. But instead of balance, the game was really plagued by ability spam in my opinion. Cooldowns were just too short, and some factions like the Cleaners were blatantly overpowered, especially if you're kind of average at shooters. One-shot firebombs that does a huge AoE damage, with no real counterplay, turned matches into these chaotic messes rather than strategic play. This imbalance really frustrated players, including me. The game felt less about skill and more about exploiting overpowered abilities. In trying to appeal to both casual and hardcore audiences, Xdefiant ended up satisfying neither. If the ability spam wasn't frustrating enough, the aim assist on controllers was essentially aimbot level. Controller players could effortlessly lock onto targets with a quick ADS spam, leaving PC players to either play at an exhausting level of precision or endure this punishing matchmaking queues by enabling input-based matchmaking. This divided the community and created unnecessary friction from the get-go. In a game where balance is paramount, overly strong aim assist only widened the gap between players. For a game emphasizing movement on tactical depth, the map design was surprisingly restrictive. Most maps were small and felt really claustrophobic. limiting the potential for strategic play in the first place. That's what they kept emphasizing, strategic play but still with fast movement. Well, there was none with these maps. Invisible walls and arbitrary barriers stifle players' creativity, making encounters really predictable and, frankly, pretty boring half the time. Only one mode, Escort, managed to break free from these constraints. Its larger maps allowed different weapon types and strategies to shine. But one mode couldn't save the overall experience, and players quickly grew tired of the same tight, unimaginative layouts. At least I did. There were some glimmers of hope with some of the maps that were a lot bigger and had a bit more going on with it, but it was few far in between. Xdefiant also faced a unique challenge: Ubisoft's reputation itself. In recent years, Ubisoft has been criticized for toxic workplace culture, poor management in general, and controversial business practices constantly. And attempts to shoehorn NFTs into its games only alienated the players even more. This created a magnifying glass effect. Players and critics were eager to see if Xdefiant would rise above Ubisoft's declining standards for years now, or crash and burn like so many of its predecessors. When the game stumbled, it wasn't just seen as a failure. It was seen as yet another symptom of a publisher that's really out of touch with its audience. And honestly, that was really felt. Finally, let's talk about launches. A bad launch isn't just a rough start. It's, you could say, a kiss of death, right? Especially for long life service games, players have been burnt way too many times by broken, unfinished releases. Games like Anthem, Battlefield 2042, even Cyberpunk, even though 2 of those 3 games are actually liked more nowadays, they all stumbled out of the gate, and even when improvements were made, some players never returned. For Xdefiant, the launch wasn't just rough, it was a complete miss. The technical issues, imbalanced gameplay, and overall lack of polish alienated its audience almost instantly. In today's gaming landscape, players don't stick around waiting for a game to get better. They just leave, and they don't really look back. In the end, Xdefiant wasn't just a failed game, it was a failed opportunity, really. The idea of a fast-paced FPS with tactical depth and community-driven development was really exciting, to be honest. I was on board of it when I tried the betas. I really enjoyed it. But the execution fell short in every way that mattered. From tactical limitations to poor balance, restrictive design, and Ubisoft's own baggage weighing it down, that's a huge yikes for me. At this point, live service games demand perfection on day one. That's just the truth. Xdefiant showed up really late, really unprepared, and in a market that had no room for mediocrity already, because there's so many giants doing it better. In the end, it serves as another cautionary tale, in my opinion. Not just for Ubisoft, but for any studio hoping to launch a game in today's unforgiving market. Launch your game perfectly, or don't launch at all.